Today we've got the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, glad to be with you.
So let me just say, first off, good on you for taking Trump's woman from Michigan attack and publicly laughing at it, because Trump only thrives when he knows that he pushes people's buttons. But when you laugh at him, he shuts up pretty quickly. So I hope you can inspire some people out there. You know, this is how you deal with Donald Trump.
Well, I learned a long time ago, that you can't give bullies oxygen. And so when he used that phrase to describe me, I mean, people in Michigan started making T-shirts about it. I wore one, on national television. I mean, it's just, we're going to use this as a badge of honor and keep doing what we do.
That's it. Okay, so let's jump in. I wanted to touch on the Republican convention and the fear-mongering that we heard from this idea that Biden's going to abolish borders, to eliminating the Second Amendment, to locking people in their homes. And I want to contrast that with what I perhaps naively assumed was the more important issue of the pandemic sweeping across the country. So as someone from the Midwest, from a swing state, from a state that Trump won in 2016, can you give me an idea of what your constituents are more concerned with?
Well, I do think that he is using all of these. I don't even know if we call them dog whistles anymore, right? It's using a megaphone
bullhorn,
to appeal to people's fears and anxieties. And there's a lot of fear and anxiety right now, right? We're in the midst of a global pandemic. We still, after months in, don't have a national strategy. Over 180,000 people have lost their battle with it. That number will surely be a lot higher by November. We've got millions who are out of work. We're struggling. And so there's a lot of anxiety. But to feed on that anxiety and to turn Americans on one another is frankly, I just think it's unpatriotic. We do have an enemy. We've got a war. It's a public health war, and the enemy is a virus called COVID-19. And the virus does not care if you're from Michigan or Ohio and where that state line is. The virus doesn't care if you're a Democrat or you're Republican and where that partisan line is. We've got to be in this together. And I think from day one, they've never appreciated that. They've never, focused on that. And they've turned this into a political conversation where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris offer a plan to fix the health crisis, which in turn is what will address the economic crisis we're all feeling. And until we do that, it's going to continue to be painful and hard. And that's why I think we've got to give people a plan and show them that there's a reason to feel hopeful, show them there's a reason that we should all band together in this effort and move forward in a way that improves people's lives. But I'm concerned about it because we know that the fewer people that come out to vote, that's the story of 2016, and they're hoping to replicate it. And that's why we've got to get people registered. We've got to turn them out. We've got to show them Biden and Harris have a plan that'll fix these problems.
And, the irony of what you said of this being a war is that Trump has been so forthright in saying that he's a wartime president. He's desperate to be a wartime president. And yet when he's actually faced with one, I mean, all we've seen was denialism from the beginning. And then when he had the opportunity to do the work that was necessary to contain this virus, to follow the pandemic playbook that was put in place by the Obama-Biden administration, he opted not to do that and instead throw Hail Marys and push hydroxychloroquine and confuse people by talking about injecting disinfectant. And then now we have remdesivir and whatever other, miracle cure he's cooked up. I think that's why people are moving so quickly over to Joe Biden's camp because he's been forthright in saying that he has a plan to tackle this pandemic. And I think that that's what people need at this time.
I also think that, it's a question of hubris over humility, right? Crises reflect leaders' true character. And in the midst of all of this, we have to recognize I am not an epidemiologist. I am not a public health expert. So I seek out the best of the best and try to learn as much as we can. People's lives are on the line here. This is not a game. This is not just an opportunity to win an electoral game. This is about our standing in the world. This is about the health of our families and people. This is about our economy. And at every turn, hubris has dictated the action as opposed to humility. And I think that's one of the things that resonates from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, is that they're real people. They want to get it right because they see how many people have suffered when we're not focused on the right things.
I think Joe Biden is particularly well placed for this moment because of anybody running, nobody can appreciate and understand loss better than Joe Biden can. And so, I think at a time when, like you said, we're coming up on 200,000 dead Americans, and a lot of times this just gets lost as a number, as a rising death toll. But I mean, these are family members and friends and doctors and nurses and neighbors. I mean, the majority of the country knows somebody who was touched by this virus or knows somebody who actually died from this virus. So, I don't think that you could have a better positioned candidate to understand the gravity of loss than Joe Biden.
And I think too, the fact of the matter is, in this moment, there was an opportunity to rise to the challenge. And as much as I don't want Donald Trump to be reelected again, he had that moment and didn't take it. And maybe he couldn't take it. I'm not quite sure why, but he didn't rise to this challenge. He chose rather to focus on pitting Americans against one another and stoking fear and inciting violence. I can tell you my personal experiences when the focus was turned on to me, it changed the politics on the ground. It increased the number of death threats. It increased the number of people showing up on my front lawn with automatic rifles. I mean, the whole tone and tenor changed. And it's just designed to tear us apart for the benefit of a reelection. And that's, I think, criminal and it's unpatriotic and we deserve better.
Yeah, that's really well said. So what kind of impact has coronavirus specifically had on Michigan's economy?
Well, we're rising very early on. New York, Louisiana, Michigan, we're all in that first tranche of states that we're going through it, New Jersey as well. We took aggressive steps to save lives, and they were largely in a much stronger position than most of the nation right now because of the work that we did. Of course, it's come with a lot of hardship and big sacrifice has been made. But our economy is about 87% of where it was in January of this year. And so we've really bounced back. Of course, now is not a time to spike a football. We are nowhere near done with COVID-19 and it's all very tenuous and, it can change fast if we drop our guard. And so that's why we've got to continue to fight to make sure people keep their guard up and mask up and do what they need to do to keep themselves and our communities safe.
Well, I think that's also a testament to your leadership because, you like you said, you were criticized relentlessly. You had stay-at-home order protests fomented against you specifically for the early action that you took. So, I think we're seeing the fruits of your labor right now.
Well, there's no question that the states that followed the science and listened to their epidemiologists are in stronger positions. And that's not a partisan statement in the slightest, frankly. The state of Ohio, we have had robust, regular conversation. They're the Buckeye State, Michiganders, we're always rooting against Ohio State in the fall during football season, but we've helped one another. We've learned from one another. And I think that's what you want leaders to do, regardless of what party they're in, to recognize that a public health crisis means it's got to be all hands on deck and we got to band together and get through it.
So more broadly, Trump won the industrial Midwest, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, promising working class voters that he would revive U.S. manufacturing. But all four of those states have actually lost more than 16,000 factory jobs in the last year alone. His trade war has been a disaster, and he's needed to take taxpayer dollars to try and make farmers whole for the damage that he caused. His fake populism worked in 2016. Do you think it'll work again in 2020?
I hope not. I think that the lessons have been hard and they've been real, and a lot of people have suffered because of this undisciplined, scattered policies that come out via Twitter. We can't compete with anyone in the world. right? We're Americans, and Michiganders, we have a robust agriculture section. We've got a robust craft brewing in Michigan, and of course, manufacturing. I mean, that's what we're known for. And yet we know that a tweet from the White House can dramatically undermine all of the jobs and industry in those spaces. I remember touring a brewery after one of the early tweets that impacted steel and aluminum, and the owner said, see that vat where we ferment the beer? I guess, I don't know, you'll have to tell me if we got it right. Steel. See those cans where we put our beer? Aluminum. Every tweet undermines our bottom line, threatens our ability to keep all of these people employed. And so whether you're a farmer who exports soybeans to China or Mexico, every time these policies and changes and whims happen, there are real costs to it, to people, to industry, to jobs. And same goes, of course, for manufacturing. One of the things that I think became so stark in COVID-19, especially early on, we couldn't get enough swabs. We didn't have to do the test. We couldn't find N95 masks. We were competing against one another because the White House didn't have a national strategy. And it became very clear that when the biggest producer of swabs is in Italy, and N95 masks are produced in China by and large, and they're both shut down, that is a homeland security issue on top of a public health crisis. So we got to bring manufacturing home, and that's not happened in these 4 years of Trump.
Well, I think that's a good segue into Joe Biden's Build Back Better program. So how do you expect this program will help Michiganders and more broadly industrial Midwesterners and the American people as a whole?
Yeah, well, I do think that, American manufacturing, American jobs, American, security is all contingent on us maintaining our strength in these parts of our economy. It's absolutely essential. And Joe Biden gets that. He gets it. That's why, Elizabeth Warren, I'm a big fan of hers. She had a plan for everything. Joe Biden does too. And I think that that's something that informs the work that he does, is thinking about what the normal person in society is confronting every single day. How do they get into a job that pays them well, that ensures that when they show up, they've got the protections in the workplace that they need? And also knowing that their kids are going to have a path to a life that's even better than the one that the parent has. The Build Back Better plan is focused on green energy jobs, right? So that's a twofer. That's a climate change tactic, and it's also a way to get people to work, making investments in the area that we know is so crucial right now to our globe and to the health and future of our kids. So I think that there are a number of aspects to the plan that he brings, but buying American, supporting American manufacturing is something that inures to all of our benefit.
And I think something interesting too that we should remember is, Trump spent so much of his time on the campaign trail pandering to coworkers and basically dying industries, when what he could have actually done to help the American people, knowing that coal is going away anyway, is pushing people, especially in more vulnerable areas, especially in areas that are depressed because they're reliant on industry, into a growing sector, into the sector of renewables. And instead, he's just kind of delayed the inevitable and given other states or regions that have, taken quick action to adopt renewables the advantage, and B, given other countries the advantage.
Right, absolutely. And I think, there's leaders, I think the leaders that really get things done are ones that can show you a path forward. Not just appeal and tell you more of what they assume you want to hear, but who can show a path forward. And I think your point is really important, that to go and pander and tell every audience what they want to hear, and then not to really have a plan for a transition, for a path forward, for looking toward the future,
his slogan is literally "Make America Great Again."
Again.
There's nothing forward thinking about it.
There's not. And I mean, I think that when you saw the convention last week and saw that they didn't have a platform and can't answer the question of what does 4 more years mean, what does it look like, it tells you that this is a campaign driven around hubris and one personality as opposed to in a future for Americans.
So I want to transition over to speaking about Kenosha and violence more broadly. And this is at the risk of letting Trump dictate the terms of the conversation, because clearly he would rather talk about violence than coronavirus, for example. But I do want to touch upon this issue and not pretend that it doesn't exist. So Trump's campaign has made it clear that they want the violence because they think it'll benefit him politically. Kellyanne Conway said it. Laura Trump said it. What are the implications here of the president of the United States using the biggest bully pulpit in the world to foment violence in American cities?
Well, it's incredibly dangerous. It's incredibly scary. There's not a leader prior to Trump who I think used that pulpit, that bully pulpit, and the biggest megaphone in the world to encourage Americans to attack one another. And that's really what it boils down to. I understand that there are people who maybe don't understand what the demonstrations are really about. And we need to educate. There's no question. And we need to make sure people know that equity and fairness don't come at someone else's expense. It actually strengthens the fabric of our country when that is the reality. And they're feeding into that fear that if someone else gets fair treatment or an equitable opportunity, it's going to inure to someone else's detriment. It's so hard to explain, and yet I saw it written somewhere that just because you say we've got to protect the rainforests doesn't mean you're against all the other forests. Right. And it means you recognize that there's a unique threat to this particular type. And that's what Black Lives Matter is all about. And that's why this conversation around policing and frankly COVID-19 is so important. The disparate impact of historic policies and practices that have made it, inequitable for an obvious, population in America means we all got to be a part of fixing it.
Yeah, and I've said before, with the phrase Black Lives Matter, it doesn't, there's not a limited amount of mattering to go around, So I think that was a really good point that you brought up. After Trump saw how much he could milk Portland for campaign footage, he actually threatened to send federal troops to Cleveland, Milwaukee, and Detroit in your state. So 3 major cities in 3 swing states, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan. Is he even trying to hide the fact that politics are driving his actions here?
I don't think so. I mean, it is very clear that that's what is driving a lot of what's coming out of the White House right now. It's about November 3rd, and it's about helping himself. And I think that we're all being played for fools when that kind of conversation is what's occurring. And so I fortunately think the American public is smarter than that, but we can't make any assumptions about turnout, about translating Joe Biden's policies into what it really means for people at home at that dinner table. And we've got to continue to coalition build. I think one of the most optimistic things that I've seen over the course of the last 6 months, because there's been a lot of tough stuff that we've had to confront as a nation, is seeing these diverse, enthusiastic, positive groups of people coming together around equity and coming around ensuring that people of color are safe and respected and have opportunity and health in this country. And that's a source for great optimism. I joined one of the marches that was put together by a number of ecumenical leaders. Lots of different faiths came together and said, we want to show our support. And I went, even though I thought it was important we mask up, we're still in the midst of this pandemic. But I went because my kids were saying, we got to go. We want to be a part of it. So these teenagers and young people and groups of different, people who have struggled under this administration are coming together, and that is powerful.
I think that's a good segue into voting in general. So what steps has Michigan taken to protect voting rights ahead of the election?
So a few things. First and foremost, I'm so grateful that in 2018, voters of Michigan elected a number of strong women to take on all of our executive offices. So Secretary of State is Jocelyn Benson, our Attorney General is Dana Nessel, and they are really leading the way. But one of the other things that we did is make it easier for people to vote from home. We amended our Constitution in 2018. And so this is really the first election that we've had this tool. And I think a lot of people are going to avail themselves of it. And thank goodness we did it, because none of us knew we'd be in the midst of a global pandemic when we adopted this. But we made it easier for people to vote. We're holding the Trump administration accountable. We are one of many states that is suing the Trump administration around the efforts that they have to undermine the Postal Service, despite the representations made by the Postmaster General. We have reports coming out of our post offices and pictures coming out of them where machines are being dismantled. And so we're taking them on, but we're also supplementing our clerks' work in terms of ensuring that they've got drop boxes. So if people request an absentee ballot, which they'll be going out in a couple of weeks, that when they get it, if they have any reservations about it getting in the mail on time, they can drive up and drop it off in a lot of our clerks' offices. And we think that's going to be another important tool where there are going to be so many efforts to undermine it.
I do know that more than 10,000 ballots were rejected in the primary because they were postmarked by Election Day, but delivered after 8 p.m. This is a state with a margin in 2016 of just over 10,000 votes. You know, that was the difference between a Trump victory and a Hillary Clinton victory. So what steps are being taken to ensure that voters aren't disenfranchised in that arena?
Yeah, so you're asking a really smart question. I wish I had a great answer for you, but I have a Republican legislature. Both chambers of my legislature are Republican controlled. I would love to get a bill to my desk that says if it is postmarked before Election Day or on Election Day, it counts. But under the current law, it wouldn't count unless it's received on Election Day. And this legislature is not going to make it easier for people to make sure their ballots get counted. And so that's why we are getting these ballots out soon. That's why we're encouraging people as soon as they come out, fill them out and turn them in. And if you want to drop them off, we'll have drop boxes available. Unfortunately, with the legislature that I have, it's just probably very unlikely that we'll be able to authorize anything postmarked to count. So we got to work around that.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, we know that, we hear the date November 3rd, but in actuality, I mean, like you said, as soon as you get your ballots, it should be no later than mid-October, like you said, drop boxes and even bringing them to the elections offices themselves.
Yep. It's important for people to know that. You get your ballot, you can take it into the clerk's office and drop it off. We know that it is taking, in some cases, 2 weeks for domestic mail within a state to get to its destination. And that's why it's important that people know that this is an option that is available.
Awesome. Well, Governor Whitmer, thank you so much for your time and for your leadership, especially, in the face of so many attacks by the president.
Thank you. You're doing great. Best of luck to you.